All right, Shalom. I want to start off by giving all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashum Yahushai, Bahashum Rakakwadash, and double honors to our apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well, and grace and peace to you elect around the four winds, believing and pushing His truth in all sincerity. May the blessing of election be upon your houses. This is your fellow servant, Rokaria from the GMS Orlando camp, coming at you with another impromptu lesson. All right, part two. I had to restart the live stream. All right, but nonetheless, the title of this lesson is going to be Your Thoughts Will Always Fall Short. All right, your thoughts will always fall short. And, I just wanted to get into a lesson tonight on the importance of being renewed and transformed through the spirit and power of Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai. All right, because there are certain precepts, certain parables, certain dark sayings, and certain traditions that are contained within the scriptures that you won't be able to understand when you apply the Western mentality. Ultimately the Bible, is written from an Eastern point of view. A lot of our traditions that took place in the ancient world really don't make any type of sense to the people over here in the West, because the mentality and the traditions are totally different. The standard that the Lord set up from the foundation is totally different from what Esau has established over here in the West, the wickedness that Esau has established over here in the West. When you apply that Western mentality to what you read in the scriptures, a lot of things aren't going to make sense. Therefore, in order to understand the mysteries, the dark sayings, and the parables that are contained within the Bible, the scriptures speak about being transformed and renewed by the spirit of your mind. What you're going to get here in Romans, the 12th chapter. This lesson was inspired once again by that encounter that the elders in Dallas had on Friday during that live camp with that young Jake that claimed to be from the IUCBK. I was watching a video earlier today from the Elder Yashawamba, and you have a lot of people who are butthurt, on the situation, and what transpired, in the situation. First and foremost, they're butthurt because that guy didn't know what he was a part of. They felt like brothers were coming at him hard, in which just trying the spirit by the spirit. That's really all that was. The elders weren't even coming at him hard. Two, a lot of people were butthurt and resorting to the slander of us being rapists and us being PEDOs, which is a complete falsehood. And all of those of you who are claiming and proclaiming that, you're gonna eat your words at the end of the day. The Lord is gonna turn that same false accusation upon your own head. Believe that. But people, you still have people here, 2025, with all the lessons that have been brought out, who still fail to understand, the scriptures due to their twisted and warped mentality. This is Romans chapter 12 and verse 1. It says, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of the Heavenly Father, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto the Heavenly Father, which is your reasonable service. And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. And a lot of men are proven to still be conformed to this world, even though they proclaim to be Israelites. Their thoughts, their evil suspicions, and their vain opinions are overtaking the reasoning that the Lord has laid out for us through the scriptures. And you have many examples of that. You have many examples of people's mental shortcomings, being pushed out amongst the congregation. You had these guys, One Body and Satan, over there in Dallas, who proclaimed that Yahweh Shai didn't do any miracles. You have this guy from the IUCBK that the Elder Yashawam was getting into, proclaiming that John the Baptist wasn't in the truth. You have some men that say Yahweh Shai isn't to be worshipped, amongst the so-called Sakari, which is broken up now into different sects. You have a lot of mental shortcomings that are being propagated throughout the congregation. And it's because they're still conformed to this world, and they haven't really transformed or been transformed, by the renewing of their mind according to the Spirit. All right, and the Spirit is the Word, which we're going to get that in John the 6th chapter. But it says, and be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is that good and acceptable and the perfect will of the Heavenly Father. And in order to prove what is acceptable unto the Heavenly Father, you have to be transformed. You can't meet or you can't come into the service of Yahweh Bashim Yahushai with a Western mentality. It's just not going to work. All right, you have to come to the realization that everything that we've been taught here in America, Babylon the Great, was the wrong way. How to worship the Heavenly Father, what the Lord's name was, what his son's name was, truly, what the Bible was truly talking about, prophecy, all right, the traditions of old, the standard that the Lord uplifted from the foundation. We didn't learn any of these things in America. All right, what a true man is, what a prophet is, what a true man of the Lord is. We didn't learn any of these things growing up in Babylon the Great. What we did learn was everything contrary to the standard that the Lord has uplifted, even down to the smallest things, such as writing from left to right. Everything has been changed here in the West. So when you meet that contrarian mentality that we've been taught here, when you apply that contrarian mentality to the scriptures, obviously you're going to have some sort of shortcoming. And that's what we're seeing, increase, in these latter days. But it says again, and be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of the Heavenly Father. All right, and how are we transformed? Let's get this in John chapter 6. In verse 63. It says, it is the spirit that quickeneth, the flesh profiteth nothing. The words that I speak unto you, they are spirit and they are life. All right, so this word is likened unto the spirit of the Lord. All right, and in order to be transformed, all right, and renewed according to the spirit of Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, we must first conform to this word. All right, and it's in 100% entirety. All right, not 50%, not 40%, 100%, 144%. We have to conform to this word and apply the reasoning that is laid out for us according to the scriptures. A lot of men are trying to apply their own reasoning to parables and mysteries that are contained within our Bible. And it's causing mental and spiritual shortcomings. I wanted to get this in Isaiah chapter 55 and verse 8. All right, because the Lord said, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord. All right, the Lord said our thoughts are not his thoughts. All right, our thoughts can't measure up to the thoughts of the Heavenly Father. The scriptures say in Jeremiah 17, in verse 4, it says, verse 9, it says, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? So when it comes to our hearts, when it comes to our minds, all right, because the word heart, in the Bible, and especially in the Old Testament, is the Hebrew word lab, all right, which goes into your mind. When it comes to our minds, our humanly minds, our fleshly minds, they're desperately wicked. They can't measure up to the thought process and the rationality that the Lord has on high. The only semblance of the thought process of Yahweh Bashim Yahushai that we get, the reasoning in the heavens, is laid out in the scriptures. So in order to understand the will of the Heavenly Father, we must go according to the reasoning that's been laid out for us. But it says again in Isaiah 55, in verse 8, it says, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. For as the rain cometh down and the snow from heaven, and returneth not thither, but watereth the earth and maketh it bring forth in bud, that it may give seed to the sower and bread to the eater, so shall my word be that goeth forth out of my mouth, it shall not return unto me void. All right, but the ways of the Lord are higher than our ways. They're higher than our thoughts. And when you try to apply your own thoughts into the rationale of the Lord, you're gonna fall short. Your thoughts are always gonna fall short, when it comes to the Lord, man. That's why the Lord gave us a train of thought to follow, a guideline to follow in the form of these precepts, man. You know, that's how we're nourished. That's how we're brought up, and that's how we come into the understanding of the Lord's will. Is through the precepts that the Lord has left behind for us. You know, this is Isaiah chapter 28. And verse 9, it says, "Whom shall he teach knowledge, and whom shall he make to understand doctrine? Them that are weaned from the milk and drawn from the breast." All right, and the scriptures are referred to as milk. All right, even when you get into 1 Peter, the 2nd chapter, it tells us to desire the sincere milk of the word. You know, this is what's conducive to us growing, you know, and growing into an understanding of the Lord. Because like we read in Romans, the 12th chapter, we must first be transformed by the renewing of our mind. Meaning, like it says in John, the 3rd chapter, as we come back as those little babes, you know, we come back with a childlike mentality, essentially. You know, in the sense of being able to soak up and retain new information. You know, being willing to learn, and you know, essentially coming into humility. You know, being willing and able to learn the proper way and the proper standard of the Lord. All right. So, like it says in John, the 3rd chapter, you know, as we're reborn, all right, spiritually and mentally, the way that we come up on a level of understanding of the Lord is by desiring the sincere milk of the word, like it says in 1 Peter's. All right, and then, all right, being nourished by these precepts. All right, constantly nourished by these precepts. This is Isaiah chapter 28 and verse 9. It says, "Whom shall he teach knowledge, and whom shall he make to understand doctrine? Them that are weaned from the milk and drawn from the breast. For precept must be upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line, here a little and there a little. With stammering lips and another tongue, we speak to this people." All right, so we're nourished by these the precepts. All right, we gain understanding through the precepts. That's how we gain our rationale, our reasoning. All right, it's through the word. The Lord has already laid out a train of thought, a guideline for us to think by. Because when it comes to our own thoughts, they're always going to fall short, man. They're always going to fall short. And we're seeing prime examples of that pop up every single day with these Christians, you know, and with these Israelites. They are mentally and spiritually, you're constantly falling short mentally and spiritually. Constantly missing the mark. And it's because their own opinions have overtaken the word of Yahweh B'Shem Yahweh Shai, whether they realize it or not. Saying that John the Baptist was in the truth is an opinion that can't be proved, that can't be substantiated by any scriptures. Saying Yahweh Shai did no miracles is an opinion, a vain opinion at that. That is overtaking the word and a lot of the minds of the people that follow that doctrine. And they don't have sound reasoning. They haven't been brought up properly. They haven't been nourished properly by the precepts. Therefore, they're still conformed to this world, and the world is overtaking them. Like it says in 2 Timothy, the 3rd chapter, evil men and seducers shall wax worse and worse. And a part of the reason why they're waxing worse and worse is because this world has a hold on them. It has a grip on them that they don't realize. But it's slipping out through the different doctrines and different mannerisms that they have, and they propagate amongst the congregation. It's able to be seen by those who have the eyesight. But with that, you know, that's all I have. You know, Lord wants us edifying unto you elect. You know, our thoughts are always going to fall short when it comes to the reasoning that the Lord has contained within the scriptures. Therefore, we have to use the reasoning that has already been laid out for us by Yahweh B'Shem Yahweh Shai in the form of these precepts. That's the only way to understand the Bible. That's the only way to understand the traditions that were taking place back during the ancient world, the different traditions that were taking place, the different dark sayings, the different parables. All right, that's the only way to understand and truly understand the scriptures and the history that was going on back during that time. Because if you try to meet that with a Western mentality, you're constantly going to fall short every single time. Some things are uncomfortable, by what we've been taught here in this world. Are a lot of things or some things that we learn, according to truth are uncomfortable. But the scriptures are likened unto a double-edged sword in the book of Hebrews, the 4th chapter. All right, it cuts, all right, but it mends at the same time. Some things are shocking. Some things are come off as weird because we've been taught a wicked way of life. But ultimately, we understand that the reasoning of the Lord is going to prevail above all. And the reasoning of the Lord is the proper way to sustain and produce life. But with that being said, that's all I have. Lord, to elect. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashum Yahushai, Bahashum Lukakudash, and double honors to our apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well. Grace and peace to you elect around the four winds, believing and pushing this truth in all sincerity. May the blessing of election be upon your houses. Shalom. Stay up.